You have to keep your legs. What? You have to keep your legs closed. You're like, it's like right in.
Okay, I have an opening question or topic of discussion. I'm Sephora. So apologies for coming in a few moments late.
Don't worry.
So is your name Kara?
Kara, yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about being a voyeur and what's the other word you use?
I don't know.
Okay.
Participant.
Thank you. The distinction between the two, and yet your position in both like comes up so often if it's applied to your study or learning. And while you're talking to that, first it really relates to my experience with Black folks growing in the suburbs, also as cousins who live, in the hood. And I kind of tap in, tap out, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, But one of the things that I've noticed in growing up is that Black culture in general is such a all-encompassing picture of just Black people in general. For example, there's subcultures within the culture. There's a culture of like the Jack and Jill Black folk who have grown up with money, who have, their college is paid for, students with that kind of that more nepotism side of Black culture. And the unfortunate term probably the uppity, where there's the opposite of that, where the students are Black people who are maybe still subject to the marginalization of society, living in that expectation bubble. Do you have any extra thoughts on that? I know you mentioned a little bit about your experience and you're sorry about putting bite in your mouth.
That's okay.
But if you have anything to add to that, anybody.
Yeah, I do think that's something that we can all speak to. Specific, no, but like to be you especially. Come on, like to try to do this work without replicating the marginalizations, the oppressive structures that are producing these things anyway. I don't mind identifying myself as someone who has been complicit with the structures and have had very harmful ideologies and like have caused harm to people with the stuff that I've said, the way that I've acted, the decisions I've made. I'm from Atlanta. So I'm coming from a completely different context than France, than New York. So it's like my specific understanding of this is I'm from Atlanta, but I grew up in a Black suburb called Lithonia. And I don't know, like it was kind of like the other side of the tracks, if you will. Like we were close enough to like the hood and gun violence and all that kind of stuff. But my parents were very like strict about like using that as like an example, as like a deterrent, instead of like valuing that as like something that is part of the Black experience. They were very interested in producing like a monolithic type of Blackness, or like a one-dimensional type that this is what you should aspire to, this is what you shouldn't be, which is deeply problematic and like harmful and like bigoted. But like I also understand my parents because they grew up in what they wanted me to avoid. So like it's very difficult for them to find value in it, or to validate it or give it grace, because they experienced that, and it's a really contentious point in their life that they don't want to go back to. But as a result, they've produced a daughter and a son who, has a lot of unlearning to do that they have done. Like it comes, ironically enough, like my parents are the reason that I believe a lot of these things, and not white supremacy. Obviously they're, they are also, produced by this, shaped by the same context that produced something like me. You're good. Got napkins over there. I don't know. I think there's just a lot of factors at play, and I am empowering myself and also holding myself accountable by situating myself in that and like naming my complicity understanding why that happened and also how to navigate it. So yeah, but thank you for asking me that. But I do think it applies to the others if you have anything to say. Not to put you on the spot. I just put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree with the point you brought up in terms of how I think you use all encompassing. I think you said. I would say it's. I think I'm just speaking. I root Black culture and the Black working class masses. I think that's where the culture is. That's where the culture is birth, right? Because it's rooted in the working class masses. I think working class people we make our culture very accessible, and everybody can lay claim to it. Even in terms of differentiations in class, even if you're Black and not necessarily from that particular class background, you can lay claim to the culture. As a I think the idea is kind of a warrior. You can a warrior, but also a participant. Like if when it becomes a cool thing, you can lay claim to it, right? It's this cool thing now, so you can lay claim to it. So I feel like a lot of Black folk who are a higher class, they get to pick and choose what they can lay claim to. They'll discard the things of the working class that are negative, but they could, when things become popular and seen as cool, then they can lay claim to it. But also in terms of I guess challenging and kind of pushing back against like part of the work that I do in my research is I think a lot of when we think about public housing communities, there's this narrative of gloom. Folks think we're constantly living in fear of our lives. They think public housing is this war zone where we're just all scared and ducking bullets and violence. And public houses, our communities are so much more. There's joy, there's bonding. Like these are actual communities where people care and look out for each other. So like part of the work that I'm doing is I'm interested also kind of challenging the gloom, the kind of negative narratives around life within public housing that I think the media, but also, and this is also part of it, but I think also residents have contributed to that. We think about hip hop, like part of what I want to do is I want to analyze and explore hip hop lyrics and how have rappers kind of contributed to the negative perceptions of life within public housing. And I want to do it in a way where I'm not attempting to negate their particular experiences that they're sharing, but I want to be in conversation and kind of interrogate and maybe explore how these particular narratives have contributed to overall negative perceptions of life within public housing. So
I'm going to talk about my experience being white, and like in the political struggle, I guess. As it says on my biography, I was born and raised in France, and you might know that, but understandings of whiteness in Europe is very different from the US. There's no race, there's no color. Like colorblind is the way to go, basically. And so we always view the US as the exception, the worst case scenario. And so when there was police violence in the US, it was like, oh my God, this whole country is messed up. But then when it happened in France, it was like, but that person was kind of looking for it though, or that type of thing, because we're not as bad as them. Even though we're the ones who created that system by colonizing. So that's something that I wanted to talk about, and especially because I participated in that vision of we're not as bad as them, right? But we are, because white supremacy is a global system. And I've kind of realized that pretty early on when I was around 14 or 15. I mean, early on, I guess, 10 years ago. But basically where I live in France, it's in the east of France, so at the German border, in a region called Alsace. And Alsace was invaded by the Germans during the World Wars, right? And so during the Second World War, we were German, and we had concentration camps. So a big part of our curriculum in schools is to learn about the Holocaust, Shoah. And as school trips, we would go to concentration camps. When I was like 12, 11, which is very early on, but they want you to experience it, right? And the more I learned about it, and I like took that, there's like a contest about an essay writing contest in France about the Holocaust to kind of perpetuate the memory of it. And I won this contest, and as a result, I was invited to visit a fort where Jewish people were concentrated and executed. And when I was asking questions about the whole like Nazi system in general, I was like, okay, but how the hell? Because it felt like such an anomaly. It's like, how the hell did we get here? And when they told me that they actually got inspired by slavery and white supremacy in the US, I was like, oh. So it's been all the way, like, you have to look all the way back to kind of understand, and not just like understand it not as a national, like, exceptional phenomenon, but as something that's global. As I said, white supremacy is global. So even though I thought I was woke in the sense of like enlightened at the time, I have so much to learn, but also so much to unlearn. And even though I feel like in my head, you can always, as a white scholar, you can always be, oh, I'm not like one of them. But yes, I'm still am, because I was raised that way. And so it's a ongoing process of unlearning every single day, every minute. I have to check in with myself, make sure I don't overstep and take too much space. But yeah, so that's something that I have to think about in my personal space, in my friendships, but also in my research, because academia will make you go back into those very vicious ways of thinking because of the way the system is set up.
And the kind of privilege that we assume just by entering into the university.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, like, you know, the way that we walk in the world is very different when before we entered university and then after we come out of university. Sorry. No, jump in. Okay.
Are you raising your hand?
We're still students after all.
Well, now I forgot what I was gonna say. I think that you made an important point that people tend to overlook about like the learning, but also the unlearning. And I think that people think that that is like whatever minority group that you're studying, that's the other's problem. You know, if you're doing Black studies and you're not Black, you have to unlearn racism, you have to unlearn white supremacy and colonialism and all this stuff, but not the Black people that do it. And it's like, we are part of the same structures. I'm so sick of these narratives that like, just because you belong to a minority group, you're automatically privy to like the history and the like how the structures are working against you, and like the intersectionality of those structures. Like
how we as, sorry to interrupt you, but how we as people of color also perpetuate,
yes,
like recruited into perpetuating those structures.
Yeah. And like I am very comfortable talking about my history. I see, 1 second. Yeah. I'm very comfortable talking about my history and like how I'm complicit in these structures, because like naming it is part of how you get better. And how to keep it at the forefront of your mind and not to become complicit. When I got into the PhD program, my brother took me aside and was like, okay, congratulations, yeah. But like, you just got to promise me one thing, that you're not going to become weird. Because these people, these scholars, they get so far into academia and so far removed from the community that you forget how to take a joke, you know, like you forget how to, and not like racist jokes, obviously, but like you forget how to like return to the roots of like who made you as a person, or like what qualities or what communities made you. And then you start looking to academia for validation. You start changing the way you talk. You start, you know, becoming like this elitist, like esoteric type of person that is superior, that is narcissistic, that is, you know, classist and ableist and all these things that, you know, you're supposed to be of people, and then you become of the academy and you forget where you came from. And so I identify as a Black lesbian feminist specifically because I'm Black, I'm a lesbian, and I'm a woman. But all these things do not necessarily mean that I have a comprehensive handle on like all things queer. I don't have a handle on all things, you know, all gender issues or racial issues. Like there's a lot of unlearning to happen for me too in every respective space. Like I still have a lot of ground to cover with queer studies and feminist studies and Black studies and everything. Decolonial practices are not just happening in a vacuum. Like we are also shaped by conversations like this. Like I don't know what you're gonna take away from this panel, but like it's a conversation and it's supposed to be accessible and you're supposed to feel compelled or like you could, if you wanted to, participate. There's not supposed to be this, you know, oh, they're the scholars, I'm the listener. We're in a conversation together, and when you start to forget that, that's when you become weird, in my opinion. So yeah.
I'll jump back in, but at any point, if anybody has anything to add, I will shut my trap so you guys can talk as well. But I really resonated with your point about the idea of Black experience becoming the monolith. This is the picture perfect experience for someone who is of color, but particularly Black in America. Especially because my mom was extremely poor growing up. Raised in a single parent household when my dad was relatively also poor growing up. And now having become successful, they harp down, me and my sister and I, to be one, independent, financially successful, all of these things that they were not, so that, you know, in a way it's putting me above the system, but it's also creating such a stark difference between me and I feel like my cousins, people who are in a different space than me. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then also, Professor Singers, you said how people also perpetuate these issues. To me, Baddies, Sexy Red, all those TV shows that glorify, does anyone know what I'm talking about? Like those TV shows that are like, that like I said, glorify the idea of just women fighting against each other, being purposefully derogatory and just like demonizing one another, demonizing the Black woman experience just because it, you know, it gains views and it, you know, it's entertaining, and yet it's doing so much harm to the image of Black women. Yeah.
Counterpoint. Not counterpoint, counter question. I think it's real easy to find like examples of, you know, harm and examples of exploitation and monolithic narratives. My question specifically to you is, what's your favorite Black girl character, and what show does she come from, and why is she your favorite?
Have a second to think about it?
Yeah. It's a big question, but I'm coming back.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. Tara's question.
I know.
Yeah.
Willie Gilbert from Different World. First, she was so annoying. Oh my goodness.
I agree.
It was her voice, but love her so much. But I love how, like you yourself, she came from a different part of Black community. She was raised in, her family was wealthy, and she was not from the hood. She was in the better parts, per se. But being in Hillman College, it helped her to unlearn some of the things she went through, and she became an advocate. And I just love that she was able to adjust herself and unlearn the things. I'm going through that myself because I was raised a Black family in church. This is the traditional Christian family. Yeah, that's where I was raised from. I'm from here, like I said. And so, just coming and being a part of Nazareth, it challenges a lot of the things that I was raised to that were right. And I'm going through the unlearning process as a parent, raising two Black children, Black girl and a boy. So I just love how Whitley was able to gracefully, in my opinion, it was rather graceful, gracefully unlearn some of the things that she was raised on, and not just unlearn it, but be a voice as well. So that love me some Whitley.
Good answer. And yeah, I guess I was asking you in particular, but to open it to everybody, to challenge or disrupt these narratives like the monolithic Black experience, or like, you know, superiority and like, you know, inferiority and all this stuff. Like my reason for asking this question, and you can continue to think about it, is we talk as though there's just like this one image, or like there's maybe two images, the good and the bad. But there's a wealth of Black media. Like there's like the Tyler Perry type of Black media. There's the Insecure, Issa Rae type of Black media. There's Ryan Coogler, like Sinners, and like Black Panther, like all of these types of different facets of Black media that, you know, it's very easy, maybe as like non-media scholars, to sit here and say, oh, the representation is poor, or it's divisive or whatever. But like, if we really problematize and like open up this conversation, there's a lot more to pick from than like the knee-jerk responses that we rely on. And that's kind of like part of my work too, is that, you know, even though I'm framing it as like a cultural appropriation, Black aesthetics are not just, you know, the acrylic, the baddie, you know, the aesthetic of the bad bitch or whatever. There's, you know, the natural queens, like there's like, you know, the Sadiddy, like Divine Nine, like there's like different Black aesthetics, but we always only talk about, you know, the one that brings the race down or whatever. And it's just like, that's not really fair of us. And I think that I'm pushing back on that statement to like, oh, expand your framework, like liberate yourself from that reaction, or from that anchor point, because there's a lot more to glean from it. Go ahead.
I completely understand that. And honestly, I appreciate you continuing to push my framework. Because like you mentioned, I am a part of Divine Nine. So my encounter with, you know, with the Black experience might be different than, of course, it's different than the like, I keep going back to my cousin, but there's just a difference. My issue with TV shows like Baddies, or with celebrities like Sexy Red, who portray this very hyper what's the word I'm looking for? This hypersexual, hyper aggressive, hyper, just the
In other words, a caricature.
yes, an exaggeration of everything that people in society have deemed Black women to be. Those are the clips and the people who are growing up. So like on TikTok, when you type in Black women, or like I feel like it is just as easy to see those, in my opinion, negative personifications of Black women, when you're not seeing the beautiful Black women who are their natural hair. You're not seeing the beauty of Divine Nine. You're not seeing, you know, these different organizations as easily and readily as you're seeing Black women beating each other up, or tearing each other down, or having their boobs out, or their butt is shaking, shaking their butt. You know, like that's where I feel like the issue is, and that's where I feel like it kind of is difficult to see as someone who wants to bring children into this world, you know, and wants my children to have the full experience, but also have just as many role models as they do. I mean, and I wouldn't call them not role models, so I'm kind of struggling to find the terminology, but that's why I bring it up. It's because there's, you know, this big difference between the two.
Can I bring in an accountability question?
For me?
No,
Oh,
for
that's
everyone. To all the white people in that room, when Kara asked who's your favorite Black character, or Black woman character, how many of you thought about a show where the Black woman was the best friend, but not the main?
I was gonna bring that up actually. A lot of like Glee, Disney Channel, they're always the comedic relief and the best friend. And that's not, I went to Zendaya first and her work. But I also thought of that and how that narrative and stereotype is only accessible to kids watching Disney Channel or kids watching Glee and that sort of thing. So I kind of thought of that as well.
Because my first thought was Veronica from Shameless.
Yes.
And I was like, wait, but she's the best friend. She's not the center of the show. Who's the center of the show? And all of those shows that I carry deep in my heart. And I was like, oh damn.
Gotcha.
Got it. And then I thought about Ladry Denver in Bridgerton, but in Charlotte, because she's my role model. Not only because I'm in love with the actress Arsima Thomas, but I just love the character. And I was thinking, oh, who else? Have you seen This Is Us? Beth. She is a whole like very well-rounded character.
The wife.
Yeah, Randall's wife. I love her character so much. But even I, as a Black Studies major, I had to check in with myself and be like, oh, yeah, all those shows that I've grown up watching are not centering black voices at all. So it's something that we have to counter every single second in the way we build like our cultural corpus.
I think another way to like counter all this and like challenge, what our knee-jerk responses are is like who watches Dance Moms or watched Dance Moms? Messy. All y'all raise your hand, messy. Who watches Jersey Shore? Who watches, there's also like very like the Honey Boo Boo, all these like shows. So like I think you see where I'm going with this, that like it's not just Black folks who have, messy low class media. People like mess, people like drama, people like violence. They do, they just do. And so how come when it's Black, it becomes prescriptive or indicative of our national character or, representative of Black people as a whole, but when, yes, comprehensive, like when it's Black or when it's a minority or person of color or when it's queer, like RuPaul's Drag Race, like, all these things, like the girls are fighting and people love to watch, but when it's white, you can also divorce it from what it is and be like, oh, they're just those type of people and not white people are ghetto. People never make that association, but you do that with people of color, you do that with queer people, you do that with the other in general. So like my whole point here is that when we're talking about media representation, we're talking about TV, we're talking about, pop stars, like, again, like to think about Sexy Red is so interesting to me because like, she don't give a damn. She is going to be authentic to herself and like, she also does lean into a caricature, but it's also profitable. This goes back to, the Black aesthetics being commodified. And like, why is it a problem when a Black woman is making money off of that image?
Sabrina Carpenter, that's fine.
Yeah.
This is empowering.
But it's also like, what's the difference between Sexy Red and Meg Thee Stallion? People love Meg Thee Stallion. People cringe away from Sexy Red. People don't want to admit to like, liking her or wanting to see her. And it's just like, unpack that, babe. Like, no, seriously, like I'm not talking about you. Just like in general, just like unpack that. And I'm speaking to myself too, because it's very easy to like fall into these traps, and they are traps, and society lays them at various points of our popular culture, of our upbringing. We are always encountering or brushing up against these narratives that incentivize you to groupthink, incentivize you to like lump people into social categories and not have nuance. Everybody has nuance. The people who raise their hand for liking Dance Moms, I'm sure you're very well-adjusted, normal, nice people, okay? But like those women on that show, they're not. I mean, they're not portraying, a certain aesthetic that you would want to replicate or that you would want your daughter to act like or whatever. And it's just like, we have to dig a little deeper with these examples that we're using, because it's not just Black folks who are doing it. But
I noticed about the examples given, so they're all women.
Right.
None of them are men. That's it.
yeah.
We're jumping to that since.
Yeah.
Women agenda studies students, you guys didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. Can you guys just say your names and your majors and introduce yourself to Cara, Dominic, and Pernell?
Hi, I'm Rosemary. I'm a psychology major in the women's gender studies. I'm Ellie, my early childhood education and religious studies major. I'm Margaret, and I'm a modern education major with a education tech. I'm second art education. I'm Riley, I'm also an art education major. I'm Precious, and I'm a community youth development major. I'm Grace. I'm a music composition. I'm Maggie. I'm an occupational therapy major. I'm Zipporah. I'm an anthropology major in sports. I'm a student art major. I'm Tatum. I'm a business major.
I'm Molly, I'm a student at the psychology. I'm Phoebe, I'm a psych teacher and a social worker. I'm Emmy, I'm a community development teacher.
Thanks, everybody.
Vanessa.
Oh, sorry, Vanessa.
Vanessa,
And Julie, if you'll introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Julia and I'm a women and gender studies major.
And while we're there, how many of us are not graduating this year? All right, we desperately need your help. We desperately need your help. We need,
Oh, you want me to talk? Okay.
we need student
Put it on the
leaders.
spot.
We need student leaders for the Intersectional Feminist Alliance student organization. Otherwise, they're going to wipe us
Shut it
out.
down. Yeah,
Shut it down.
I am the only person in the club right now. And we need people to be in the officer position so that we can get a budget for next year. So I don't, like, I feel like it sounds like a huge commitment and I don't want it to force it onto anybody, but we really want to keep this club going and it's really important. And if anyone would be interested in helping out with that, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I need to recruit, yeah, Rosemary. Stephanie, Rosemary, and then you guys decide which positions. We need a treasurer, we need a vice president, and we need Phoebe. Thank you.
Can you just explain exactly like what?
So,
So
okay. I don't know, actually. So last semester, this girl came into my women and gender studies class in the middle of October and was like, gave the same speech basically. It was like meeting people in officer positions. And then, so I just kind of got thrown into it. And she was like, well, we kind of do like this flower thing on Valentine's Day. But Dr. Summer Sebum and I had talked about a ton of different ideas. Like we wanted to have a book club to read the book Wicked because it's a lot more politically charged than the movie and the musical. And we wanted to kind of talk about that and then we could watch the movie together. We wanted to, there was so much.
we wanted to do, and this is what political organizing is about, which is also what being in a student organization is, that we learn to organize on campus. And as I shared with Julia, you know, there are heartbreaks and disappointments, and those are failures and frustrations, but they're all setups to success in the future. It's all training ground. So to answer your question, Phoebe, we basically do whatever we wish to do and consciousness raising on campus. So whatever issues that you guys want to bring to fore, if it's the issue of Black aesthetics and the kinds of discussion that we're having right now, this is what we would continue in a Intersectional Feminist Alliance student organized community gathering. So just like all other student organizations, we organize events on campus that we invite the campus community to come to. Most of the time, not a lot of people come, and we try to get students to do collaborations. This is what we're talking about earlier in the panel. We're so isolated, and the institution likes to keep us isolated because we're all supposed to be all busy in our work, and then we don't get to like communicate with each other. Student organization is also to come together to support each other in our academic success. So rely on each other, talk to one another to say, you know, I'm struggling with this situation on campus or with my classes. It's also a community building space, especially for the student leaders like yourself. And then you guys get to organize events that you open up the campus community to join. But really, it's not a lot of work or time commitment. It's about organizing, you know, like 3 events each semester. Yes.
So just to give you some examples, these are some events that we had talked about. We didn't actually do any of them, but we talked about having a discussion, like an open discussion, to discuss the change in administration, because it's
The Trump
very
administration.
scary right now, and I think people would benefit from talking about that. I think we need to be talking about Gaza still, because it's normalized that there's a genocide going on and it's being live streamed everywhere and people are okay with this. And I feel like I've talked to Dr. Sandra Sebum about this. This school is way whiter than the school that I came to. And during our women and gender studies class last semester, I have a lot of Muslim friends. who are from the Middle East and who like I have Yemeni friends who their families are there. And last semester I got kind of into an argument with this girl because she was like, well, we need to be worrying about our own people right now. And we need to be worrying about America because Hamas is a terrorist group. And I was like, this is the exact type of awareness that we need to be spreading. Because how is it okay to normalize something like that? Like, yes, we do, there are people that need help in America, but like our houses are not being built. Our children are not being built. So we need to collectively take responsibility and be like, this is our, it's not gonna come from the administration. It has to come from here. It has to start somewhere. I wanted to talk about the civil war in Sudan. I wanted to talk about diversifying the club because it is called the Intersectional Feminist Alliance. And when I went into it, it was 3 white girls, which is neither intersectional and now it's 1 person, so it's not even an alliance anymore. So I wanted to talk about diversifying the club and reaching out. I reached out to like Lambda, the BSU,
Reach out to Valley.
El Barrio.
Or,
yes, I did.
okay.
I didn't get a response
Reach out
back.
to La Casita, which is Spanish house, that's their new name.
Okay.
Cause like, it seems like, I used to be in Barrio and they kind of mix codes, Casita and Barrio.
So do you have
And,
someone
like,
that checks those emails though? Because
Somebody was very, I wish I was ready. So,
yeah.
I was supposed to be.
Ellie, are you a junior?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior.
I know, but I'm like, let me know, cause I'll try to.
Because I
Yes,
did
right.
send an email to that club.
Yeah, so can you guys,
Yeah.
can you guys exchange emails so that you can support each other?
I
So
sent
in the
emails to-
meantime,
to a
in the
lot.
meantime, Rosemary, Stephanie, I'm sorry. You're graduating, but so Stephanie and Phoebe, will you guys connect with, and will you guys sign up for those officers?
Yeah, but what are they?
Vice President, Treasurer, and Secretary.
Vice President, Treasurer, and Secretary. Okay, oh, wonderful, thank you so much, thank you so much.
The last thing that we had talked about in the specific email is I wanted to see if we could make it able to, in the dorms at least, to have free feminine hygiene products. Because to me, I think it's kind of strange that we have like toilet paper because that's something that we can't control, but we don't have feminine hygiene products, which is also something that we can't control. And we live here, and I don't like, nobody has to buy their own toilet paper, so I just feel like that should be something that we have.
Hobart and Williamsmith has products everywhere, and I'm gonna look it up now, but it's like a certain.
That'd be good.
There's an organization called Menzies and Need, I don't know if you've heard of her, but, she's on Instagram, and I think her whole organization is, based on, you know, providing period products, period products, and just education in general. Menzies and Need, MENSES.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, all right, so Precious and Stephanie, Rosemary and Phoebe, please, you know, before you guys, leave the room, exchange emails, phone numbers and so on, and then, you know, decide on what positions that you want, because we have to fill out that paperwork this week. And just, you know, you can decide now, and then you can change your minds once you guys get the fall semester. Coming back to what we were talking about earlier, in our conversation, and you know, these particular popular icons. So when we're talking about the Black aesthetics, as part of Black aesthetics is the aesthetics of care, the aesthetics of refusal, the aesthetics of liberation, the aesthetics of struggle. So how might we think about, and if we're talking about, you know, these characters, what was the last character that you guys were talking about? I don't know these shows.
Your care.
This is us.
That?
No, the one where you said she, you know, she, as a Black woman, you're like, she's.
Oh,
sexy red, sexy red.
Mhm.
So could we think about the aesthetics of refusal? Is she actually by exploiting a capitalist system? Is that a form of refusal?
So when you asked the question about who's your favorite Black female character, the one that came to mind for me, just because I watched this movie like 3 days ago, is Whoopi Goldberg's character in Sister Act.
Oh,
And I think that is a perfect example of kind of resisting and disrupting those stereotypes, because she was like this lounge singer. For those who have not watched the movie, she's a lounge singer. She's like very sexualized and whatever. And then she goes to this sister house, and the nun, the head nun, is kind of looking down on her because of her lifestyle. She doesn't agree with it, but she ends up making all these changes to the church that was so beautiful, and it's like so much better than than before she had went there. And at the end, she was like, finally, I understand that it's not just like, you're not just this sex symbol, there's like a human being behind that. And I think she did a really good job of disrupting stereotypes.
Her kids are right. Watch Sister Act. Watch Sister Act too.
No, I haven't seen
Oh,
Sister
babe.
Act.
Let me know when you do.
Okay.
other thoughts that you guys have, any questions that, yes.
Kind of switching gears for a second, but on the subject of representation in media in general. I'm an English education major. I'm going to be an English teacher in like 2 months, which is crazy. But I tend to look at things through a literature lens or through an educational lens. Were you cognizant of these issues or of this voyeurism when you were in grade school or even earlier college or that sort of thing? And how did that kind of affect how you did? What kind of literature were you interacting with in high school? How did this kind of influence or inform your later years? I'm very passionate about the classics, like the canonical literature and the harmful stereotypes presented through that. I just did a capstone project on it at our conference last week. So I feel like that aspect of representation is very lacking. I just kind of wanted to pick your brains about what kind of literature you interacted with. How did this kind of inform your practices or dissuade you from certain authors, certain stereotypes? That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about myself because I feel like my classics are different than the
Different.
classics
That's
here.
true. Yeah.
But I'm gonna talk about the topic that I was discussing with my students in class. So I'm TAing a class on African American history from the Civil War to 1954, and we're kind of tackling education after Reconstruction, so after 1877. And there were two schools of thought about education, with like Booker T. Washington, who was more into industrial education, where you are trained to be to do manual labor to like maintain the status of Black people in the U.S. So more accommodationist stance on Black education. And then you had Du Bois' liberal arts education, right? And I was presenting my student with those two examples, and I was like, well, which one is like more agitational? Which one is more like more of leaning towards accommodation? And everyone was like, yeah, like Du Bois is better because liberal arts. And I'm like, well, when you think about it, who are they reading? What type of value are these students gonna internalize?
Right.
And I was like, if they read Aristotle or like even Kant or Kant, how do you say that? Kant? Which contributed to anti-Blackness in philosophy. Yes, you are like integrating, and you will be able to access those spaces where those like elite spaces, because you will have read those texts, but what type of epistemology, so ways of knowing, and what type of ontologies, ways of being, will you have internalized by reading that?
So I was actually an English major in my bachelor's.
Very cool.
Hey, so
Yeah,
sorry.
no, it's not perfect, that's fine. It's all right. I
Now,
won't take it
I'm an
personally.
author. I write lesbian fiction, romantic fiction, lesbian romantic teen fiction. As my own experiences and like, you know, my own perspectives on love, and I'm a bell hook scholar, so like all that stuff is like in those books. Now, when I got into college, but I didn't even want to go to college, to be real with you. Which is hilarious. That's where I was student. But yeah, I didn't want to go to college, but I did because I found the one program in Georgia that had creative writing as an undergrad major. And then it got bought out by another school. So that creative writing major became English. So I never chose English. I say that to say that having to resort to English and, you know, reading these books and the canon and reading Brit Lit and American Lit and like, you know, postmodernist and all of these words that I just did not care about. Like I couldn't see myself in these books, like whatever depictions were in the books I didn't identify with. Like I was still, you know, I was at the crux of my unlearning when I was like 18, 19. But I do think that like the Black Lives Matter protests, like in 2020, 2021, I mean, at various points, like Black Lives Matter's origin, like in 2014, like started the conversations for me. But like by the time George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, like Philando Castile, like all these back to back happened, I was like, what the hell am I doing reading these British aristocrats?
Yes.
I don't give a single care about the struggles, you know, the problems that these rich white women have. I lamented my position and like how I couldn't shape the curriculum, how I couldn't decide what I wanted to read. It was always told to me, this is what's important. This is what literature is. This is how you write. This is how you write a character. These are the tropes and all these things. And I was just like, says who? Like literally, like says who? And so me being an author and like writing my own narratives that like do not look like Brit Lit, do not look like, you know, classical American, like I hate Henry David Thoreau. I hate Emerson. So sorry. I know this is like gonna get me like staked up. but
I'm gonna interrupt just in the interest of time. One of the things that you're also doing, which we haven't had a chance to talk about, but I really want us to, and again, this is just touching the surface. You developed the Black Feminist, the Black Lavender Collective, which is a feminist organization that you created at University of Massachusetts Amherst. And can you share with these guys, especially as we're trying to recruit for Intersectional Feminist Alliance, like what's the purpose of your student organization? Why did you, in addition to everything that you've just shared about your experience as a student, but what are you, and Anel, Dominic, you guys are participating in the Black Lavender Collective. What's the impetus? What's the energetic force that created this organization for you guys? And what is your intention? What you hope for it to do while you're there and also after you leave?
Good questions. Okay.
Yes.
Well, what I was just sharing is actually integral to like why I created the Black Lavender Collective, which is a Black feminist and queer organization. That's the lavender part of it. And so I created the Black Lavender Collective through a grant that I received because I was sick of not seeing myself anywhere. UMass Amherst is a very white campus, and it has like a large minority population, which sounds funny, but it does. But they're mostly Asian. They're East Asian, South Asian, you know, Desi, like that is like a very large percentage, but Blackness is not well represented. So there are like Asian clubs, like in like Chinese clubs, like K-pop clubs, like, you know, Desi clubs, like all these things, and like everybody has their little niche, but like every Black thing that every Black org was kind of like based on ethnicity, it's based on nationality, like, you know, religion. And I was just like, do we have anything where people can just come and talk? Like everything is so political and, you know, boots on the ground type stuff, but like, where do we have spaces of refuge? Where do we have sanctuary? Where can we just come exist and come with what we have and not be required to bring anything more? And so I founded the Black Lavender Collective because I was tired of like my English classes, like dictating what is important, and whose voices matter, and who needs space, and also like how to act in those spaces and all these stipulations. The Black Lavender Collective, our tagline is it's a Black and queer, Black feminist and queer sanctuary. And the intention of it is very simple. It is not, I mean, it is inherently political to take rest. It's inherently political to be in community and have conversations like this. We're basically at like a Black Lavender meeting right now. Like this is the same type of character that is at those meetings, would you say?
Oh, yeah.
Like just discourse, just talking to one another, getting to know perspectives, and like sharing your life and like where you come from, in a political context, in a social media context, in, you know, whatever. Like it's really not super dictated by like the structures of like what is inherently valuable to dominant society. And so, I mean, you guys can speak to it too, but that was my intention of like just disrupting like this idea of like Black organizations that have like politicization and you know, political organizing at its root, where we can just have space to just exist and come together and lament about the administration and talk shit about our professors and, you know, complain about stuff, talk about something that pissed you off this week, talk about something you're so excited for, talk about the concert you just went to, you know, make friends. There's so much happening in the world that like makes you orient to be a certain way, especially as a college student. But there's also a lot of us that gets left behind in pursuit of becoming a scholar. And so the Black Lavender Collective is kind of there to like pick up those pieces and make them important and valuable as well.
Which is what we're hoping for, the same for intersectional feminist alliance. One of the things that we talk about as part of our collective work together is that how is the Black Lavender Collective, your work with Black Lavender Collective, how does that connect with your research? And similarly, you guys, you know, whatever organizations that you belong to, as part of your musical life, as part of your sports life, Maggie, you know, lives that, you know, we're all holistic. You guys are not just students in the Women and Gender Studies, you know, Intro to Women and Gender Studies class. You've got, you know, your whole lives, your whole beings with, you know, multiple facets. How do we not ignore all your whole being as you come to this class or, you know, to this campus? And similarly, you know, how does our work, like your work in Black Lavender Collective, how does that intersecting with your research on Black aesthetics? You know, what are the through lines? What are those intersections? What are those linkages that we can find in those different aspects of our lives, rather than having our lives be siloed? Like, I'm a student here, I'm a student in this class, but then this other part of me is left behind, or I have to hide that part, or I have to squash or silence that, or like that part of me can't speak because it won't be accepted. Like, how do we just refuse those? How do we?
I think it starts in a structural practice of an academic setting, like the structure of a university or academia in general, because I feel like we're all expected to leave everything at the door when we come into a classroom and just do that, like just study mathematics or just study English literature. But I have 2 majors and a minor, so like everything is intertwined. Like anthropology of dance, I've never studied dance before in my life, but I see Shakespeare in it. I see different literature like frameworks and structures within the production of dance and within witnessing dance that I see when witnessing literature and reading literature through a feminist lens. You can watch dance through a feminist lens. So I think that we kind of have to leave everything at the door from what we have been previously taught about academia and about the university as a whole, not this university, university in general, because it's not one thing. You know, it's not one size fits all. It's not the same in the classroom. You kind of have to take a step back and then take a step forward with your whole being. If that makes sense.
I think that so for my C-Ready classes, Professor Brooks, she starts well in the my very first class, in the very beginning of my first class. She talked about how just having an open mind. There's gonna be things that you're not used to doing, you're not used to seeing, or you're not used to doing. You know, it's important that we come with an open mind. So I think to build off of the structures, you know, the structures of how the classes are built, that first conversation is so important. Like, okay, you're entering into space, and it's okay to have an open mind because the conversation in this space may not line with whatever you know. So starting there, you know, the structures and the conversation, the welcome to my class, have an open mind.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions that you guys want to share?
You told me not to. Well, anybody else outside?
Going off of what you both said, I think it's also having to stop, like we talked about the competitiveness, and we have to stop, like it's okay to be wrong about something. So at least for me, in our women and gender studies class last semester, it was like, I felt like everyone was way more comfortable to talk. And in our anthropology of dance class semester, nobody wants to talk that much. And for me, at least, it's because I don't want to sound stupid in front of the dance majors.
I agree. No, I agree.
So and that's something I'm working on. Like, I know that's like, they're not going to be like, shut up, Julia. But in my brain, I'm like, I just don't want to sound stupid.
I'm in the same exact boat.
Yeah. And I think we need to, that starts at a young age. Like, we have to not put that idea into people. Because then it's like embarrassing if you're wrong. It shouldn't be embarrassing. It's okay. That's the whole point of learning and going to class. But from a very young age, we're all like, you have to be right.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of mindset that we need to take.
Were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay, good. Dom, we were on our way up here. It was a 5-hour trip, y'all. We had a lot of conversations. And Dom mentioned something that he was like considering in his research about like objectivity, and like being like on this topic of like being right, or like, you know, being an expert, or being the authoritative voice on a certain subject, and not like where you're saying like about leaving part of yourself at the door, and like having a certain way that you must comport yourself to enter this academic space. I have thoughts on it, but I wanted to know if you wanted to speak to like maybe your struggles with like objectivity, or like the way you were like mulling over it. Just because I thought that you had valuable insights about that like made me think about like my own research.
I think within academia, we're trained around this. I don't think there's a such thing as objectivity, but we're taught to be kind of objective and to remove ourselves from the work that we do, not make the work that we do personal to us, even though it is very personal to us. And so that's kind of what I've been struggling around, this idea of objectivity, right? As a public housing resident, this is literally home, right? And I'm just worried about people questioning the validity of my research because I'm of this community, and so I guess I'm just kind of struggling around the possibility of accusations of bias, and I'm just struggling with that.
And I think that's where the aesthetic of refusal comes. That's where it enters, and that question, that struggle and questioning, and is the refusal of objectivity. And it also is opening the door for the aesthetics of care, and making visible your struggle is enacting an aesthetic of struggle. And it is opening the space for community members to be your advocates. So when you tell that story to both these communities, and invite a conversation, and invite those challenging questions about bias, and then we start to have an opportunity to rethink, well, why is, when is bias harmful, and when is bias essential for an empowerment of a community, or essential for what else? When do you guys think is bias essential and supportive? When could a bias be actually generative as something good?
Something consistently, and then have the background knowledge of this institutional, societal, and like saying like I have a bias towards it, but then understanding why someone may have that bias. I think that's the point. I don't think it's good to have one, but I think it's good to understand where it comes from and why.
Right. Even the language of bias, like bias is supposed to be something that is bad. Well, I'm a feminist. Does that mean that I have a bias? I do. Yes, I do. So I have.
Yeah.
In the humanity, like in any study like anthropology, anything where you're studying people, just in general, you have to have bias.
Yes.
Because that's how you care about.
Exactly.
Like, if you don't have biases, you don't care. And it's coming from that point of objectivity, like, how can you even love what you do if you don't have bias?
Right, and to your point, Precious, I also have to be open to the bias of any critique of feminism. And,